In 2025, players who come to the net win 66% of their points. Players who stay at the baseline win 46. That gap hasn't changed in 2 decades. And yet at this year's Wimbledon, less than 4% of all points involved a serve and volley approach. Less than 4%. In 1997, that number was 60. So something is wrong. Either the stats are misleading, or an entire generation of professional tennis players is leaving points on the table. Every match, every week, on every surface in the world. This video is about that gap. Why the most statistically effective position in tennis is also the most avoided one, and why the players who actually understand it are quietly winning more matches than anyone expects. For most of tennis history, the baseline wasn't the default, the net was. In the 1970s and 1980s, the game was built around a simple sequence: serve, approach, volley, done. Coaches didn't teach it as a tactic, they taught it as fundamentals. Stefan Edberg won 6 Grand Slams playing almost exclusively from the net. John McEnroe reached the top of the world with a game so centered around the net position that his backhand volley became the most studied shot in the sport. Pat Rafter, Martina Navratilova, Leander Paes, Boris Becker. The list of players who dominated by closing the net is nearly as long as the sport itself. Pete Sampras won his last Wimbledon title in 1999. In that final, he won 83% of his first serve points. He served and volleyed on almost every single one. At the peak of serve and volley dominance in 1997, 60% of all points at Wimbledon involved a player moving toward the net. The match at the 2001 Wimbledon final between Goran Ivanisevic and Pat Rafter produced 243 serve and volley points between 2 players. 243 in one match. What changed wasn't tactics, it was physics. In the late 1990s, polyester strings became mainstream. Stiffer than gut, capable of generating extraordinary topspin and pace without sacrificing consistency. Players who had relied on clean, flat ground strokes found themselves suddenly dealing with balls that kicked above shoulder height, bouncing hard and high off the court. At the same time, Wimbledon changed the composition of its grass in 2002, slowing the surface, reducing skid, making the ball sit up more consistently for the returner. The serve and volley wasn't banned. It just stopped working as often. A player charging the net in 1995 might find the return going into the net. In 2005, that same approach might find a topspin passing shot landing inside the line. Coaches responded. The message became, baseline is safer. Don't go to the net unless the ball is sitting up like a gift. A generation of junior players grew up never learning to volley properly. The footwork, the split step, the closing angle, all of it quietly disappeared from coaching manuals. Here's where the statistical illusion begins. When coaches said the baseline was safer, they were right in one narrow sense. Fewer unforced errors, more balls clearing the net, a longer, more predictable rally. But safer is not the same as better. The ATP tracks a metric called in attack, the percentage of shots where a player is in an offensive position during a point. The average ATP player registers 23%. 23%. Players with a higher in-attack percentage than their opponent win 68% of matches. Not points, matches. The relationship is that consistent, and when you specifically look at approach shots, moving toward the net on a short ball, the math gets even more stark. Players approaching the net win 66% of those points. Hit that approach as a heavy forehand directed at the opponent's backhand, that number climbs to 71.
Ghosting into the net is an extremely important move in tennis. It is very much used by professionals and not enough by recreational players. It is a deadly tactic.
The word deadly is interesting. Not useful, not effective. Deadly, because that's what the approach shot actually is when it's executed correctly. It removes options. It compresses time. The opponent has to generate a passing shot. Accurate, on balance, under pressure, from a defensive position. Most of the time, they can't. The geometry tells the story. When you move to the service line, you cut off the opponent's cross-court angle. They can go down the line, which is a lower percentage shot, or they can try to lob over you. Neither option is comfortable. Both require execution under stress. That's the point. You're not attacking the shot. You're attacking the decision. Stefan Edberg understood this better than almost anyone. He rarely approached on anything less than a strong position ball. The shot before the approach was the setup. The approach was the closure. The problem with modern coaching isn't that players were told not to approach. It's that they were told to wait for the perfect ball. And waiting for the perfect ball means never approaching. Watch any club match. Watch what happens when the opponent's ball lands short in the court. 90% of the time, the player will hit it and recover to the baseline. Not because the ball was wrong, because the instinct to stay back is that deeply ingrained. Coaches trained a generation of players to see the baseline as safety, and the baseline became the reflex, regardless of what the data says.
It brings two advantages. First, it offers the best solution to finish up the points with the minimal risk of mistake, and at the same time, it puts huge pressure on the opponent, who will be more stressed every time he will be in a defensive situation.
Carlos Alcaraz changed this conversation. Alcaraz approaches the net more than almost any other top 10 player in the current men's game. His net win rate reflects the math exactly, and his backhand volley, developed early in his career at Juan Carlos Ferrero's academy, is one of the cleaner volleys in professional tennis. He approaches on short balls. He approaches after heavy forehands. He ghosts in after a cross-court push that leaves his opponent scrambling. He's not serving and volleying on every point, but he is approaching the net more intelligently, more aggressively than the generation before him, and it shows. The baseline game isn't going away. The physics that drove the serve and volley out still exist. Polyester strings are still standard. Courts are still slower. But the approach shot, the intentional aggressive move off a short or weak ball, that never required a specific court surface. It required decision-making, and the data shows consistently that the players who make that decision more often win more matches. The irony of modern tennis is this: the baseline became the default because it felt safer. And in one narrow sense it was. Fewer errors, more balls in play. But fewer errors at the baseline and more points won aren't the same thing. Players who approach the net win 2 out of 3 points. Players who stay back win fewer than half. The math hasn't changed since Edberg, since Sampras, since the 2001 Wimbledon final when 2 serve and volleyers played 243 net rush points in a single match. What might change is the instinct, the automatic recovery to the baseline, the fear of the pass. Whether a full return of net play is coming, or whether this is just a quiet recalibration by a few smart players who read the numbers, that's not clear yet. But the data has always been there. It was waiting for someone to use it. If you're new here, subscribe. This is Smart Tennis. Drop your take in the comments.